Marcus Thompson had always believed that marriage was about partnership, trust, and shared responsibilities. After 8 years with his wife Jessica, he thought he knew her completely. They had built what seemed like a solid life together in their modest suburban home in Denver, complete with their bright 5-year-old son, Tyler. Marcus worked as a maintenance supervisor at a local hospital, pulling long shifts to ensure his family was comfortable. Jessica had been a part-time receptionist at a dental office, but she'd been between jobs for the past 6 months, claiming she needed time to figure out her next career move. The first red flag came on a Tuesday evening in March. Marcus arrived home from his shift at 7 p.m., expecting to find Jessica and Tyler finishing dinner or maybe watching cartoons together. Instead, he found Tyler alone in the living room, still in his pajamas from the night before, eating cereal from the box while watching television. The house was eerily quiet except for the sound of animated characters chattering on the screen. "Where's Mommy?" Marcus asked, kneeling down to Tyler's level. His son looked up with those innocent brown eyes that mirrored his own. "She went out with her friends," Tyler said matter-of-factly, as if this was completely normal. "She said she'd be back soon, but that was when the sun was up high." Tyler pointed toward the window where the sun was now beginning to set. Marcus felt his stomach drop. Jessica's car wasn't in the driveway, and her phone went straight to voicemail when he called. He tried to maintain his composure in front of Tyler, but inside, anger and worry were building like a storm. This wasn't the first time Jessica had been vague about her whereabouts, but leaving Tyler alone for an entire day crossed every line of responsible parenting. After getting Tyler fed, bathed, and ready for bed, Marcus sat on the couch trying to process what was happening to his marriage. He'd noticed Jessica becoming more distant over the past few months, always on her phone, always making excuses to go out. When she'd lost her job, he'd been supportive, encouraging her to take time to find something she really wanted to do. He'd taken on extra shifts to cover their expenses, trusting that she was handling things at home. Jessica finally stumbled through the front door at 11:30 p.m., her makeup smeared and her breath reeking of alcohol. She seemed surprised to see Marcus waiting up for her. "Oh, hey, babe," she slurred slightly, trying to act casual. "You're home early." "Early? Jessica, it's almost midnight. I got home at 7 and found Tyler alone. He'd been by himself all day." Marcus tried to keep his voice low, not wanting to wake their son. "He's fine," she waved dismissively. "He's 5, not a baby. He knows how to take care of himself for a few hours." The casualness of her response hit Marcus like a physical blow. This was their child they were talking about, not a pet that could be left with a bowl of food and water. Marcus stared at his wife, wondering when she had become this stranger standing in their living room. The woman he'd married would never have left Tyler alone, would never have been so careless with their son's safety and well-being. He realized that the person he thought he knew had been slowly disappearing, replaced by someone he didn't recognize at all. That night, as Jessica passed out on the couch still in her clothes, Marcus lay awake staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out how everything had gone so wrong and what he needed to do to protect his son. He had no idea that this was just the beginning of a nightmare that would test every limit of his patience and love for his family. The next morning, Jessica acted as if nothing had happened. She made coffee, kissed Tyler goodbye as he left for kindergarten, and even asked Marcus about his day ahead. But Marcus wasn't fooled by the performance. He'd seen behind the mask now, and he knew he needed to pay closer attention to what was really going on in his household. Over the following weeks, Marcus started noticing patterns. Jessica would disappear for hours at a time, always with vague explanations about running errands or meeting friends. Her phone was constantly buzzing with messages that she'd quickly hide from view. She'd started dressing differently too, wearing clothes that seemed more appropriate for clubbing than grocery shopping. Most troubling of all, Tyler had begun making casual comments about being alone, as if it was becoming a regular occurrence. Marcus tried talking to Jessica multiple times, expressing his concerns about Tyler's care and her increasing absences. Each conversation followed the same script. She'd get defensive, accuse him of being controlling, and promise to do better. But the promises never lasted more than a few days before the pattern resumed. The breaking point came on a Saturday afternoon in April. Marcus had been called in for an emergency at the hospital, a situation that required his immediate attention for a plumbing crisis that had flooded an entire wing. He'd texted Jessica to let her know, assuming she was home with Tyler as usual for the weekend. The repair took longer than expected, nearly 4 hours of intensive work to prevent further damage to critical medical equipment. When Marcus finally got home, exhausted and covered in grime from crawling through ceiling spaces and dealing with contaminated water, he found something that would change everything. Tyler wasn't home. Jessica wasn't home. The house was empty, with no note, no message, nothing to indicate where they might have gone. Marcus tried calling Jessica repeatedly, but her phone was either turned off or dead. He checked with neighbors, thinking maybe they'd gone to the park or to visit someone nearby. Mrs. Rodriguez next door mentioned seeing Jessica leave around noon in a car that wasn't theirs, but she hadn't seen Tyler with her. As the hours passed and darkness began to fall, Marcus was torn between anger and genuine fear. Where was his son? How could Jessica have been so irresponsible? He was about to call the police when his phone rang with a number he didn't recognize. "Hello, is this Marcus Thompson?" The voice was professional official. "Yes, this is Marcus." This is Officer Patricia Williams with the Denver Police Department. We have your son Tyler here at the station. He's safe, but we need you to come pick him up immediately." Marcus felt the world tilt on its axis. What happened? Where did you find him? Is he hurt? "He's physically fine, Mr. Thompson, but he was found wandering alone on Colfax Avenue about 2 hours ago. A concerned citizen called it in when they saw him trying to cross the street by himself. We'll need to discuss the circumstances when you get here." The drive to the police station was the longest 15 minutes of Marcus's life. His mind raced with questions and fears about what Tyler had been through, how he'd ended up alone on one of Denver's busiest streets, and where Jessica was during all of this. When he arrived, he found Tyler sitting in a child-friendly room with a female officer, coloring in a book and seemingly unaware of the gravity of the situation. "Daddy," Tyler's face lit up when he saw Marcus, and he ran into his father's arms as if nothing unusual had happened. Officer Williams pulled Marcus aside for a private conversation while Tyler continued coloring. "Your son is remarkably calm for what he's been through," she began. According to him, his mother dropped him off at what he thought was a friend's house, but apparently no one was there. He waited for a while, then decided to try to walk home. He got lost and has been wandering around for at least 2 hours before someone spotted him. Marcus felt sick. "Do you know where my wife is?" "We've been trying to reach her but haven't been successful. Tyler mentioned that she was going to a party and would pick him up later, but he doesn't seem to know where this party was or who was hosting it." Officer Williams's expression was serious. "Mr. Thompson, I have to ask some questions about your home situation. This is a serious matter of child endangerment." As Marcus answered the officer's questions about Jessica's recent behavior and Tyler's care, he realized that he'd been in denial about how bad things had become. He'd been so focused on trying to save his marriage and keep his family together that he'd failed to see the real danger his son was in. The interview with Child Protective Services that followed was both humiliating and eye-opening. Marcus had to detail Jessica's increasing absences, her drinking, and the incidents where Tyler had been left alone. He provided character references, work records, and anything else they needed to establish that he was a responsible parent who had been unaware of the full extent of the situation. Tyler spent that night at Marcus's sister's house while the investigation continued. Marcus sat alone in his living room, alternating between rage at Jessica's recklessness and fear about what this meant for his family's future. Jessica still hadn't returned, hadn't called, and wasn't answering her phone. She finally showed up the next morning, Sunday, looking disheveled and confused about why Marcus was so upset. When he told her about Tyler being found by police, she initially didn't believe him. "That's impossible," she said. "I dropped him off at Emma's house. Her mom was supposed to watch him. Emma who? Marcus demanded. What's her last name? Where does she live? Jessica's story began to fall apart immediately. She couldn't provide a last name, an address, or even a phone number for this mysterious Emma or her mother. Under pressure, she finally admitted that she'd left Tyler at a house where she thought someone would be home, but she hadn't actually confirmed it with anyone. I just needed a few hours, she said, tears starting to form. Sarah was having this party, and I haven't been out with friends in so long. I thought Tyler would be fine for a little while. The casual way she said it, as if abandoning their 5-year-old son was a reasonable price to pay for a few hours of partying, was the moment Marcus realized his marriage was truly over. This wasn't about Jessica needing space or going through a difficult time. This was about her prioritizing her social life over their child's safety, and that was unforgivable. The CPS caseworker, Ms. Patricia Henderson, returned the next day with a comprehensive safety plan. Tyler could return home, but only under Marcus's supervision. Jessica was prohibited from being alone with Tyler until she completed parenting classes, substance abuse counseling, and underwent psychological evaluation. The court would be involved, and there would be regular check-ins to ensure Tyler's safety. Jessica was furious about the restrictions, claiming that everyone was overreacting to what she called one mistake. But Marcus knew it wasn't one mistake. It was the culmination of months of increasingly irresponsible behavior that had put their son at risk. That evening, after Tyler was safely back home and asleep in his own bed, Marcus sat down with Jessica for what he knew would be their final conversation as a married couple. "I want you to leave," he said quietly. "I've talked to a lawyer and I'm filing for divorce and full custody of Tyler." Jessica's reaction was explosive. She accused him of being vindictive, of using Tyler as a weapon against her, of never supporting her during a difficult time in her life. But Marcus had heard enough excuses. "You left our 5-year-old son alone at a stranger's house so you could go party," he said. "He could have been kidnapped, hit by a car, or worse. There's no excuse for that, Jessica. None." The divorce proceedings that followed were as ugly as Marcus had expected. Jessica fought for joint custody, claiming that Marcus was being unfair and that she'd learned from her mistakes. She hired a lawyer who painted Marcus as a controlling husband who was trying to punish his wife for having a social life. But the evidence was overwhelming. The police report, the CPS investigation, Tyler's own innocent statements about being left alone, and testimony from neighbors about Jessica's frequent absences all painted a clear picture of neglect and abandonment. The final court hearing was scheduled for a Wednesday morning in July. Marcus took the day off work and wore his best suit, knowing that this was the most important day of his life. Everything he'd worked for, everything he cared about, came down to convincing a judge that Tyler would be safer in his custody. Jessica's lawyer argued that she'd been going through a difficult period, that the incident was an aberration, and that separating a child from his mother would cause psychological damage. They presented character witnesses who testified to Jessica's love for Tyler and her potential as a parent. But when it was Marcus's turn, his lawyer methodically presented the evidence. The police report describing Tyler wandering alone on a busy street. The CPS investigation documenting a pattern of neglect. Testimony from Tyler's kindergarten teacher about the child's increasingly erratic behavior and his casual mentions of being alone at home. The most damning evidence came from Jessica herself. Under cross-examination, she couldn't provide coherent explanations for her actions. She contradicted her own previous statements, admitted to leaving Tyler alone on multiple occasions, and finally broke down and admitted that she just wanted to feel young again. Judge Margaret Foster listened to everything with a stern expression that gave nothing away. When both sides had presented their cases, she took a brief recess before returning with her decision. In matters of child custody, the court's primary concern is always the best interests of the child, Judge Foster began. While I understand that Ms. Thompson may be going through personal difficulties, the evidence presented clearly shows a pattern of behavior that has put Tyler Thompson at serious risk. She granted Marcus full physical and legal custody of Tyler, with Jessica receiving supervised visitation rights contingent on her completion of court-ordered counseling and parenting classes. The judge also ordered Jessica to pay child support and to contribute to Tyler's therapy, which would be necessary to help him process the trauma of abandonment and neglect. Walking out of that courthouse with legal confirmation that Tyler would be safe was one of the most emotional moments of Marcus's life. His son would grow up knowing that his father had fought for him, had protected him, and had refused to compromise his safety for the sake of a failing marriage. The aftermath was challenging in ways Marcus hadn't expected. Tyler struggled with the changes in his family structure and needed therapy to understand why his mother wasn't living with them anymore. There were nights when Tyler would ask when Mommy was coming home, and Marcus had to find age-appropriate ways to explain that sometimes families look different but that love remains constant. Jessica completed her court-ordered programs and was eventually allowed unsupervised visits with Tyler, but their relationship remained strained. She'd moved in with friends and found a part-time job, but she seemed like a different person from the woman Marcus had married. The responsibility of parenthood, the weight of nearly losing her son, had changed her in ways that were both necessary and sad. Marcus threw himself into being the best single father he could be. He adjusted his work schedule to be more present for Tyler's school events and activities. He learned to braid hair for Crazy Hair Day, to help with art projects, and to be both mother and father when the situation required it. It wasn't easy, but it was worth every sacrifice to see Tyler thriving in a stable, safe environment. The most unexpected outcome of the entire ordeal was the strength Marcus discovered within himself. He'd always been a reliable, hard-working person, but he'd never been tested the way that custody battle had tested him. Standing up for his son, fighting for what was right even when it meant ending his marriage, had revealed a core of determination he hadn't known he possessed. 2 years later, Marcus and Tyler had established a routine that worked for both of them. Tyler was excelling in school, had made close friends, and showed no lasting effects from his traumatic experience of being abandoned. The therapy had helped him process his emotions and understand that his mother's actions weren't his fault. Jessica had become a more responsible person through her court-ordered programs, and her relationship with Tyler had improved significantly. She kept her scheduled visits, stayed in regular contact, and had learned to put Tyler's needs before her own desires. The family would never be what it once was, but it had evolved into something that worked for everyone involved. Marcus eventually started dating again, carefully introducing only serious relationships to Tyler, and always prioritizing his son's comfort and security. He'd learned that being a good parent sometimes meant making hard choices, standing up for what's right even when it's difficult, and never compromising a child's safety for adult convenience. The experience had taught him that real love sometimes means letting go of what you thought you wanted in order to protect what truly matters. Tyler was happy, healthy, and secure, and that was worth more than any marriage or family structure Marcus had originally envisioned. Looking back, Marcus realized that finding Tyler wandering the streets had been both the worst day of his life and the beginning of their best life together. It had forced him to confront an impossible situation and make the hardest decision of his life, but it had also saved his son from a potentially dangerous future and given them both the chance to build something better. The story became a cautionary tale among his friends and family, a reminder that sometimes the people we trust most can let us down in the most devastating ways. But it was also a story of resilience, of a father's love overcoming every obstacle, and of a little boy who learned that no matter what happens, someone will always fight for him and keep him safe. As Tyler grew older and began to understand more about what had happened during those difficult months, Marcus was honest with him in age-appropriate ways. He wanted his son to understand that his mother's actions weren't about him, that mental health and addiction could affect anyone, and that asking for help when you're struggling is always the right choice. The experience had fundamentally changed Marcus's perspective on relationships, parenting, and life itself. He'd learned to trust his instincts, to prioritize safety over keeping the peace, and to never assume that someone else will do the right thing when a child's welfare is at stake. These lessons served him well as Tyler grew into his teenage years and beyond. Years later, when people asked Marcus how he'd found the strength to leave his marriage and fight for custody, he always gave the same answer. When you see your child walking alone on a busy street because the person who was supposed to protect him abandoned him for a party, the choice becomes very clear. Everything else is just details. The story of Tyler's rescue became a turning point not just for their family, but for their entire community. Mrs. Rodriguez, the neighbor who had witnessed some of Jessica's comings and goings, became more vigilant about watching for signs of child neglect in the neighborhood. The police officers who found Tyler implemented new protocols for handling similar cases, ensuring that children in crisis received immediate support and that families got the resources they needed. Marcus and Tyler's story ultimately became one of triumph over adversity, of a father's love conquering seemingly impossible circumstances, and of a child's resilience in the face of abandonment and trauma. It served as a reminder that sometimes the most loving thing a parent can do is make the hard choices, fight the difficult battles, and never give up on protecting their child's future, no matter what the cost.